Okay.
Hi, hello, my friends. Hello, hello. I am here with another thought leader and such an amazing individual, not only in the field of East Asian medicine, but in life in general. And I wanted to reach out to this person that I've been following and watching for so many years and had never met. And so I reached out to have a meeting with this person. And I thought, why be greedy and gather all this wisdom and pearls and gems to myself? I wanted to record it and share it with you. So I would like to have a conversation with the one and only Lonny Jarrett from our field and just talk about a whole lot of things, as much as we can fit in here, and share that conversation with you. Lonny, we started talking a little bit before I hit record. And one of the things that I love about it is Lonny is just getting over kind of like an upper respiratory type of thing. And Lonny said, I feel much better because I took my herbs. And we were discussing that when we, the practitioners, the teachers, Lonny's a practitioner and has been for almost 4 decades of Chinese medicine, a professor, an author, a speaker, one of the biggest thought leaders in our field. But when we get sick, it gives us another opportunity to remind ourselves how powerful this medicine is. So I want to go into a deep dive. I want to introduce Lonny and have Lonny start with this question, if you're okay with it.
Sure. And
And
hello,
that is,
everyone. And East, really nice to be here.
yeah, nice to finally meet you face to face. The question that I want to start with, I want to kick this off, is you've been in practice for all of these years. You're still in practice, even though you claim that you're going to retire someday. And so out of all this, what is your philosophy and your approach to practice and supporting patients? And that probably bleeds into your philosophy and approach for life, because I know that you help people just live their best lives. And I know that that's one of the things that drew me to you, was you are of like the person's spirit. There's a real focus on that in your writings and in your teachings and in your way. So can you share a little bit about your philosophy to practice and your philosophy to life?
Excuse me. Well, it's I elaborated all that in 3 books in about 2,500 pages. And it took 40 years to write those 3 texts. So I was on a conference call. I do a 2-year clinical integration class. And I was on the winter conference call with my class last night in between semesters. And someone asked a question, and I don't remember the particular. I think it was a relatively new practitioner who was saying that sometimes they felt totally charged up in practice, and sometimes being in their clinic, they just have no confidence at all and feel like a fraud. And there just seems like there's so much to learn and so much to know. And I gave a longer answer than this, but I said what it comes down to is, I've been studying the human condition. I started really reading the Chinese texts around 1970 when I was 13. And I've spent my whole life contemplating them with emphasis on direct experience of what they're talking about rather than just some kind of academic abstraction. And what I've come to after 38 years of practice, I did retire from practice. I see patients now 1 day a month. So you could say I'm still in practice, keeping my finger on the pulse. But what I've come to after 40 years of study and practice of this medicine is that fundamentally the medicine is about human relationship, and the foundation of it is love. And that we have to keep that in the forefront and center. And that love is a light, and that light illuminates the human condition if we will allow it to. And that most of us don't know who we are. Most of us have been taught by culture to keep our attention on a very small dimension of what our experience actually is. And part of, I see it as my job to help the person expand the sphere of that light, to be more inclusive of all the dimensions and parts of the self, and actually come to know themselves as much more than we can just say their biographical self, much more than just a self born in time at a certain point in time that's had a certain number of years of life experience. There are just multiple, we need to be able to most of us know ourselves as the ego and are preyed upon by our superegos and might have some kind of philosophical relationship to ideas like the soul or other dimensions of the self, but not necessarily real direct and cultivated experience. So I think that part of our task as practitioners is to know ourselves so well that really to know the self is to know the patient, because there really is just one self. When I first went into clinical practice, I was so impressed by Chinese medicine's capacity to generate a diagnosis unique to each individual. But over the unfoldment of several years of practice, 5, 6 years of practice, by year 5 or 6, I had enough clinical experience to understand that universal themes were working themselves out through people, and that the differences between people were far less significant than the similarities. And I became very, very interested and focused upon the human experience. And, that means having a real waking up to the inner collective. So we start to be able to understand ourselves not just as an ego born in time and space with a limited amount of time of life experience and opinions and biases and preferences, but to have a living relationship to emptiness, to the soul, to the authentic self, to be able to see the ego in action, to be able to see the superego in action, to understand ourselves and know ourselves as spirit, and to understand the trailing dimensions of our development, our average development, our leading edges, to be able to come to a point where we can in real time see ourselves projecting. When we know when we're triggered in real time, and the whole thing is happening as an object in our awareness that we can choose a volitional relationship to, and not regress to lower states and lower stages of development, but when things are challenging, act from our, strive to act from our higher ideals, from a higher purpose and higher motive. And I see medicine as the path for clearing the vehicle of obstructions. Some of these obstructions are what Chinese medicine recognizes historically as pathogens. So if we have internal and external pathogens, but we can put in the subtle aspect of all those pathogens are a lot of crap taught to us by culture that just simply isn't so. That comes from early stages of human development that have been unconsciously transmitted down through generations that just don't hold up in the experience of a person who is waking up to themselves. So I see that there are different tasks of medicine, and these are waking up, means waking up to the states of who we are beyond just the ego state. So more subtle states, the waking up to our psychology, and beyond that to the soul, waking up beyond that to the nature of consciousness itself. So we want to wake up, but we want to grow up. And grow up means stage development. Higher, state experience, the kind of new age kind of pathology is just to consume and consume and consume higher state experience without ever translating that necessarily and transforming it into higher stage development. So we want to wake up, we want to grow up, we want to clean up, and that means shadow resolution. I'm just putting together a 12-session course on shadow resolution in Chinese medicine, which I'll be giving over next winter. It'll be a class that will be readings and videos to watch, and then 2-hour question and answer sessions every 3 weeks for, I guess, 36 weeks next year, starting in the fall. And so there's waking up, there's growing up, there's cleaning up, and shadow resolution is important. And shadow resolution is part and parcel of Chinese medicine. When we talk about resolving pathogens, wind, cold, damp, dryness, blood stagnation, qi stagnation, pathogens that cause qi stagnation, blood stagnation. When we talk about these things, they're all ways of hiding the truth from ourselves. They're all obfuscations of reality. They're all ignorance in the Buddhist sense of the word. So we have 7 stars in the Big Dipper, which is the origin of light in heaven. The spoon that stirs us through our fate. So 7 sources of light in heaven, 7 holes in the head to receive that light, and then 7 internal and 7 external pathogens. We just have to expand the notion of pathogens to a lot of the nonsense that's socialized, interjected content that's socialized into us. So I was making a slide, my PowerPoint 2 days ago on interjected content, and I wanted a graphic for it. And I thought I'd go to the internet and find a picture, or I'd make a picture in Photoshop because I'm a photographer and I'm pretty good with those graphic tools. So I was going to either search for or use AI for or generate a picture of a child with a funnel going into its head. And then I realized that's the Chinese character for education. It's a picture of 2 hands putting removing the darkness in a child's head by socializing it. And it's literally a picture of 2 hands forming a funnel over the character for infant. So I just used that character as the graphic. So the issue here is that unresolved shadow at lower stages of development. And when I say lower stages, for all practical purposes, 99% of the shadow that needs to be resolved at this point in human evolution is from the first 3 chakras. So the first chakra is oral stage and survival. Second chakra is sexuality. Third chakra is power, 2-year-old temper tantrums. And those 3 chakras are below the diaphragm, and the diaphragm is the internalization of wall run by the liver, which is supposed to regulate the flow of qi so that repressed content can rise into consciousness and we can deal with these lower things. But instead, the diaphragm tightens and we shove down to the basement content from the first 3 chakras as we begin to rise up to the 4th chakra, which is membership consciousness. That's the stage of consciousness you were at when the most important thing in the world to you was having the same sneakers that your clique had, or the same color bicycle, or the same hairstyle, right? And so that's above the diaphragm. And as the ego rises out of the abyss of the unconscious, just run by reflexes and innate tendencies toward survival, sex, and power, it's socialized by the membership collective and to belong. And most of that socialization is ethnocentric, colonial, patriarchal. And so we want to rise out of that to become individuals. And so at some point we start questioning the membership narrative, and we become mythic rational. We go to our parents and say, you know, Mom, I looked up the chimney and there's no way a 300-pound guy is getting down that with a bag of toys. And then we become rational. And what rational does is it represses the first 4 chakras. It sees everyone at the membership level as ignorant fools, because it's an ego. The rational self is an ego starting to become an individual. The mythic membership differentiated out of the void with 10 commandments and 12 steps to live by. But now at the bottom of the throat chakra, we're starting to speak my truth, right? And it sees everyone at a membership level as ignorant and true believers, and people below that are just superstitious at a magical level of development. So it represses. And above that, we have postmodernism, where people start to deconstruct power hierarchies. So they look at science and deconstruct it. They look at the state and deconstruct it. They look at religions and deconstruct it. You have your truth, I have my truth. Nobody knows the truth. You do your thing, I do my thing. If by chance we meet, it's beautiful. And I have to self-express. And we become pluralistic, able to hold many points of view. So we're not religious, we're spiritual. And we can see the commonalities in all the traditions. And then all those stages of development I just went through are the cultural wars. And then above that, we start to get a top-down view at the top of the 5th chakra, where we actually start to become self-authored, and we really awaken to the inner collective and can start have a hierarchical understanding of all these voices inside and what their different motives are. And we start to cease repressing and open up to, you know, the wounded inner child, and to be able to see all the different parts and understand they're all doing their best, and to understand, trying to help us, and to understand their motives holistically. And above holism, we have integral awareness, which is a complete top-down view of our own personal history, as well as a top-down view of the evolution of culture on the planet. And in the holistic and integral stages, we self-author. And when self-authoring is complete, we reach the limit of what's possible as an individuated separate self. Like the Talking Heads song, we've built our whole life, and then building a self, constructing a self, and we get to a point and we say, oh my God, this is not my house, this is not my wife, these are not my kids, what have I done? And at that point, when we see through the self we've authored, we get a toe across the line into the transpersonal, into the universal dimensions of the self. So in terms of the philosophy of my medical practice has always been developmental. It's not just about giving. Look, we're treated, if anybody's paying us $25 a week for an acupuncture treatment, even at $25, they exist in the top 5% of all fortunate human beings on Earth, alive now. There's no one in Guatemala who can pay you $5 a week unless they're running the government. They're making $5 a month or $30 a month. So, you know, I realized early on that our medicine has to be about more than just providing pleasant experiences for the most fortunate people who've ever lived. And that it has to be about waking up, growing up, cleaning up. And then the last imperative when we wake up, grow up, and clean up, then we have to show up. We have to engage with life. And my guiding, a very big part of my guiding philosophy in medicine is the Bodhisattva vow. And the Bodhisattva vow says, may I be a boat, a bridge to guide the wounded and suffering to the distant shore. And that is the character Jin, as in Zhengqi, upright qi. It means to go to the distant shore without stopping halfway. And the vow says, may I be the doctor and the medicine. And anyone of average or slightly above average intelligence can become the doctor. There's no acupuncture school in North America that ever turned down any student that could afford tuition and met the basic requirements, right? So becoming the doctor is one thing, but becoming the medicine itself, so that before we've said a word, before we've given an herb, before anything's been done, who we are is the medicine. That to me is the foundation of clinical practice.
Wow.
And the Bodhisattva vow tells us, because everything must eventually be let go of, why not dedicate all we are and all we have now to the well-being of others? And may no interaction ever be insignificant. So those are the guiding principles that I aspire to in my practice, and that have really been the guiding force of my life. I mean, when I was 14, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I didn't know what I didn't understand a lot in it, but I mean, I understood some of it. But I was reading that in the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching. My mother had a library, an extensive library in the house, and I found all of Burton Watson and James Legg's and Richard Wilhelm's books. And I read them all voraciously, starting somewhere between 13 to 14 years old. And at 14, I had this moment of reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I said to myself, I'm giving my life to this. And I took a vow, this is what my life is for. And, I'm not a Hindu, and I'm not even a Buddhist, although I've spent some time with all these traditions and reading them and contemplating them. But anyway, yes, so I think that might have gotten to. So I look in a developmental context, and my last book, Deepening Perspectives on Chinese Medicine, is 1,050 pages looking at Chinese medicine in a developmental context, with 1,400 citations from developmental cognitive transpersonal psychology, neurobiology, neurophysiology, and depth psychology in conjunction with the Taoist canon, and my interpretation of the writings of Louis Ming and the other authors in the Taoist canon. And yeah, so that's been my interest in my approach. And of course, my background is that I studied with J.R. Worsley and went through a school that he had started in Columbia, Maryland, which doesn't exist anymore. And in that school met Leon Hammer. And then as soon as I graduated, contacted Leon, and I called the school and I said, who was that cool doctor who used to come that I met a few times? And they told me, and I looked him up, and it turned out he was living an hour and a half from here. So I started to go follow him in his clinic, and I asked him in a short time if I could run seminars for him. And I ran all his seminars out of my office for 10 years. So I practiced 38 years. I did 95,000 sessions. I mean, I did 50 to 60 patients a week. And every new patient, I would do a 40-minute pulse diagnosis on. And, spend 2 hours. The initial meeting was always 2 hours. Leon would come to my office and we'd see 2 patients a day, and I'd take the person's pulse for an hour, and then he'd take their pulse for an hour. And then we talk about them 2 hours, have lunch, and then see another patient. And so, yeah, so that's my background and my basic orientation.
Wow.
It's a deep combination of 5 elements with a profound Chinese medicine physiology that predates TCM. It's Dr. John Shen's family tradition.
Wow. So much deeper than, like you said, traditional teachings of TCM. There's so much richness in what you just shared. I'd like to go back and highlight a few of the things that you shared because they are so rich. Number one, you started with love. And
well, that's the source, the path, and the goal.
Right. So it's like if we start with that, we drop into love and ride that energy towards development. If you're not growing, if you're not developing, then you're doing the opposite of it. It sounds like, if I were to summarize the philosophy, the approach starts with love. And then I wrote down the word self-mastery. And I'm sure that does not encompass it all, because
well, it's just a stage. It's self-mastery really would be what I would call, what Maslow would call self-actualization in that sense. And that's a significant stage of development, but there are more, all the 4 transpersonal stages at least above it.
That's what I was saying. It's like you get to self-mastery, which for some people is still part of their journey. They're not even there. Like you said, we need to know who we are. We are the medicine. So if we don't know who we are, how can we be effective medicine? I love how you said, to treat the other person, treat yourself. And so while it's just as beautiful, it's like a yin yang symbol. There's just so much to conceptualize here in treating others. We're treating ourselves, and treating ourselves, we're treating others. That person that's in our practice is ourself. It's a reflection of ourselves.
A student asked me last night, these conference calls I do in between semesters are just so students can ask questions. And the student said, I have all these, I'm starting to get irritated. Like, I talk to people about needing to take this on or take that on, and they just don't do it. Or they say, I've already done it. I talk about the inner child and they think they've already done it already. And I think they've already done this, or they just aren't up for it. And I said, have you read my last book? And they said, well, just parts of it. I can't read it in order. I said, start on page 1 and read to page 1050 in order. Take your time. And she said, it's hard. And I said, well, if you're not willing to do what your teacher is telling you to do, when you spend all this time and money to take this 2-year class and you're taking it now for the 2nd time, how would you expect to generate the gravitas it would take to inspire your patients to do what you're asking of them?
Right. That patient was a reflection of themselves.
Yes.
Just showing up so they could see that. And that irritation is a beautiful reflection of where there's work to be done on our own personal development on that path. I'm so grateful for you in allowing me to record this, because this is so powerful for me. And I'm imagining how many other people are going to have some big aha moments in this.
Well, I'd like to respond to one other thing. The term self-mastery, the only issue with it is it tends in popular culture to be understood in the terms of people like Jack LaLanne, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Tony Robbins. So the question is, which self are we mastering? And the lower usage of that term would just be to sort of, like in the sense of the forum and landmark education, I say I'm going to be there at 6 and I'm there at 6. Do you see which is just becoming basically a responsible adult and a reasonably well-functioning ego. So we need to make the discernment that there is a self, there is a Shen, there is a spirit, small s, and all of those are commensurate with ego and superego. And then there is a Shen, a self, and a spirit, large S, which is the one. The infinite field of light, luminosity, compassion, love, intelligence, wisdom, and that we are that. And what we call a spiritual experience is generally when either spontaneously or because we've swallowed something or done some practice, the boundary between small s and large s gets porous for some period of time. And then, you know, in the West, we might say the Father and I are one. In the East, Nagarsiddhata says, "Thou art that, I am that." And so it's that recognition of there being really no separation between small s and large s. So self-mastery is actually fine if included in that self is soul and spirit, and at the core of that self is an unfolding mystery that we know our cognitive processes are never going to be able to contain or fully understand, but we can still feel the allure and the pull of the depth of that mystery in our hearts.
When you're saying small s, large s, are you referring to the inner collective in larger outer collective, or are those separate concepts? And can you explain a little bit more of that inner collective? I wrote that down as well.
Sure. Well, at earlier stages of development, people have all these voices in their head, excuse me, and they anthropomorphize them and they become other. And so the superego becomes a voice that's torturing me. And the voices of the first chakra, it takes work for the ego to rise out of the abyss. When the 8-year-old child or the 7-year-old is afraid to go to sleep at night because there's a monster under the bed, they're not rational. So it does no good to get on all fours with them with a flashlight and show them there's nothing under the bed. Because the monster under the bed is the abyss that their ego is going to fall into if they go to sleep. When they're struggling actually to starting to struggle to become an individual and differentiate out of those first 3 chakras to become socialized into a membership collective. So the abyss is in them and they're just externalizing it as the monster under the bed, which is this irrational, undifferentiated chaos where I have all these crazy dreams and I don't understand. And so at that stage of development, you have to do magic. You have to hang crystals from the bed and say, these will keep the monster down there, because they're still at a magical stage of development. They're not rational yet. So anyway, every medicine has its person, place, time, and dose. And medicine that will help heal a person and make them more whole in one moment will create stagnation in another moment. You know, so I mean, yeah, so anyway, we have a consumerist society. I had a patient build up in clinical practice for 2 months that he was going to go on a 7-day survival retreat where he was dropped off in the middle of the jungle with only a few gallons of water and a pot of, you know, some rice and a stick of thing of matches. And he came back, and after months of talking about it, I asked, how was the retreat? He said it was unbelievable. He said, the day I got home, I did 3 grams of psilocybin to help me assimilate it. And I'm like, there wasn't enough to take you out like 5 years in your, right? So people are just consuming experience,
Right.
but learning very little from it. I mean, we've had we've had now, really, if you go back to William James, 140 years of psychedelics. And there hasn't been enough waking up. And very little growing up in relationship to all of the experience that's consumed. So anyway, when I talk about Shen large S, what I'm talking about is the undifferentiated field of love and light in this whole universe that all structures exist within. So on the gross level, those structures are planets and bodies and all the physical objects in awareness. But the subtle structures in consciousness are thoughts, emotions, sensations, feelings. Those are still just structures in awareness. So Shen large S is awareness itself, and there is only one.
Is that considered an outer collective versus
No.
the inner collective?
No, ultimately there is no collective, there's just one.
Right. Okay.
With one intelligence and one consciousness.
And
so one of my big projects, East, has been, which I had thought of for 10 years before implementing it. But a year and a half ago, I got together a collective with 7 other thought leaders in the field who I considered were at or around an integral stage of development. So Heiner Fruhoff and Laurie Deshar and Randy Lewis, Brant Stickley, William Morris, Alexander Love, Vasanti Vanyasingham. And we have, once a month, we release a video of intersubjective dialogue where we are letting go of, like last month, we discussed depth. We've discussed, what is illness, what is healing, what is intersubjectivity. Our upcoming dialogue is going to be on death in February because we're following the seasons. So these are all on YouTube. If people want to Google, Chinese medicine, intersubjective collective, they'll come up with 7 or 8 hour-and-a-half-long videos we've done. And this is going into a larger collective where we're speaking from and as spirit. So if we look at the absolute dimensions of the self, heaven and earth, earth would be yin, heaven is yang, and yin is emptiness, yang is luminosity. And the virtues of emptiness are ease in the face of stress, wisdom in the face of stress. So a pervasive ease that comes from the part of the self that wasn't born and won't die. That's timeless and dimensionless. And is always a witness of what's going on, but never involved with it. Everything that's going on is emerging from it, but it's just the witness of it, interested. And out of that emptiness explodes eros, the erotic impulse. And that light travels up the 7 chakras, and each chakra, each stage of development. And the chakras are relatively gross levels of discernment of the evolution of this impulse through the self. Much more nuanced are the evolution of the points on Rendu and Chiang Mai. And I finished my last book with an appendix on the relationship between the Rendu and Chang points and the evolution of consciousness through the 3 heater. Up the Chiang Mai, in the middle, the lower, the middle, and the upper Chang. And that would be a whole 600-page book to write, but I'm not going to be the one to write it. I've laid the template for it. But, emptiness is ease and just profound ease, nowhere to go. That's the Buddha, nowhere to go and nothing to do. And then the Eastern Enlightenment, Jesus' passion. Jesus is walking down the road and somebody says, I've recognized you and want to follow you, but first I have to bury my father. And Jesus says, according to Hebrew law, and Jesus says, let the dead bury the dead. We've got somewhere to go.
Wow.
So that's the erotic impulse. So at the lowest level, in the first couple of 3 chakras, the erotic impulse has no ethics. It just wants what it wants when it wants it, regardless of the consequence. It wants culmination of an instinct and an impulse with no top-down relationship. And then the 4th chakra has a lot to say about that. And it sees all people at that level of development who are all at a tribal level of development as heathens, and it kills them all. Anyone who won't socialize and recognize Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad as their savior is other and has to go.
Yeah.
And then if you start to question Santa Claus can't get down the chimney at that level of development, punishment is excommunication. You lose your membership collective. You're no longer one of us. You're either you're in or you're out. So these are the meta-narratives that are universal, that all the TCM differential diagnosis is occurring in the context of, and we can actually understand all the pathogens and all the stagnations and all the excesses and deficiencies. TCM isn't wrong. TCM is a true but partial perspective. And what it's negated is all the subtle dimensions. So when it talks about phlegm, it just means the stuff you can spit up. Phlegm in TCM has a weight. But the subtle dimension of phlegm that can't be measured is just feeling burdened by that which should have nourished us, that we've transformed instead of, have a pathology where we transform all potential sources of nourishment in life into just bowling balls in a duffel bag we're dragging behind us. So, and it's that, and all the complaining about it and victimization about it is phlegm and damp. It's just a subtle dimension.
Do you think in that metaphor, the act of gratitude, the practice of gratitude would help resolve that type of phlegm? Gratitude, even for things that seem to be challenges, disruptions, and negative impacts on our life, having gratitude for those challenges as they aided in our development. And by having that gratitude, that would be a practice of dissolving that type of phlegm.
Well, sure. Well, gratitude is one of the virtues of an enlightened consciousness. Gratitude is a natural manifestation of the recognition of the gift of an incarnation and how precious that gift is. And it comes from the bodhisattvic vow of may no interaction be insignificant. And so when we recognize how short a time we are here in comparison to infinity, and that we understand that in every moment we have a choice and how precious that choice is, and that what hell is that after we die, that moment that consciousness persists, but it loses its filter. And I always imagine that hell is that the moment we die, we are shown the full potential of what our incarnation could have, the outcome of our incarnation could have been if we had only at every moment lived up to what the highest we knew was true in comparison to what the outcome actually was, given the choices we made. Mm-hmm. And I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead literally when I was like 14 years old. And it was, first of all, that translation sucks. And it was also way beyond me. Mm-hmm. But I got one thing out of it. And the one thing I got was, when you die, go toward the white light. And I very naively felt a total sense of relief at the time. And I remember thinking, as this 14 or 15-year-old, how easy is that? I'll do whatever I want. And then when I die, go toward the white light. That's pretty simple. And you come to realize, at least I've come to realize in life, that when you die, you're going to keep doing the exact same things you were doing before you died, for the exact same reasons you were doing it. And you're not going to go toward the white light when you die any more than you're giving yourself to it right here and right now. And you'll avoid it for the same reasons, and you'll go to it for the same reasons you're doing it right here, right now. But there is no other moment.
Yeah. One thing I resonate with very much so is that concept of hell being you die and realize you didn't live up to your highest potential. And it sounds like, from your philosophy and approach to practice in life, that the best way to reach that level and not have that experience of hell is to live each day with reverence, gratitude, and seek the highest development. Would you agree with that? Like,
Well, yes, and
stretch yourself that way.
yes, and the hell is that I implied but didn't get to, is now you can see it all, but you don't have a body and you can't act anymore. So the gratitude is, I'm here, I can act, which is, of course, a common archetypical theme in, like, the story Scrooge,
Yeah.
for example, but I'm sure every culture has that kind of story or folk story or myth. So gratitude is just the passion that comes from Eros rising to higher levels, awakening at the heart, awakening at the throat, at the third eye, at the top of the head, realizing there's only one moment, and all I have is this moment, and all I'm ever going to have is this moment. I was just talking to I just did, just before I got on with you, a clinical consultation with a student/patient. And I have all the students in my 2-year class. The first day, I prescribed to them, I want you to meditate half an hour every day for the full 2 years of the course. And in my new book, the first 60 pages are on meditation. That's how important I think it is. It's the foundation of development.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, I'm sure you won't mind this. I'm sure it's not bad, but what I do when I meditate now, because I find it uncomfortable, this person's mental constitution. I found it uncomfortable, this idea of letting go of everything, because when I let go of everything, I can't breathe. So what I do is I just put a horizon out in front of me, and I imagine I'm looking at the horizon. And I said, well, what you're doing is you're taking the final step of letting it go and moving it off far enough in the distance that the mind feels comfortable and doesn't feel like you're ever going to actually let go to step beyond it. And the horizon represents the step you have to get to the horizon and step off into the abyss, where there'll never be another horizon again, because the only moment there ever will be is right here, right now. And there'll never be another time to act, or more time later in which you can do anything that needs to be done. And out of that, I think it's recognizing that, in which gratitude, your heart just breaks open with care.
Mm-hmm.
And with gratitude, it breaks open. And so many people want to come to us to heal their broken hearts, but I've become quite convinced that healing means learning to live with a broken heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
How could anyone living in the world we're in today not have a broken heart?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we all have those challenges, face the difficulties. And as we develop up, like you so beautifully and eloquently described the development process, we get above to the higher chakras and energy systems and connect more with the field and a higher consciousness collective. then we see those things from the top level down as gifts in our development, because to develop, perhaps it's necessary to have these challenges, these heartbreaks. They were crucial in the development process to give us something to work on. And those challenges, those problems were the exact things that aided in our development. So with all of that being said, I mean, this is such a deep conversation. What would be your advice to a practitioner out there on living their best life and not ever reach, like you said, like right now, all you have is this moment. So I've heard you say, take advantage of this incarnation, don't waste it. And so would it be taking action, meditating for sure, because the meditation will definitely give you access to development, right? That's the foundation for your development, is becoming still and going within. That helps with the development. What other advice would you give a practitioner to be their best version?
Well, the two pieces of advice I'd give in this short time is, one, people need to take themselves seriously. What I find in my clinical practice is I've generally taken people far more seriously than they've taken themselves, because we can see the Buddha nature in everybody. And it's terribly hard as both a parent and a practitioner to see people suffer when their salvation is only a minute shift of attention away. And the other thing is, I'd suggest that Chinese medicine is the science of integrity. All we can diagnose is how yin and yang are coming apart. And all the therapeutic actions we can take are to remove what's not real and strengthen the presence of what is real, to promote the communication between yin and yang toward an ever-developing integrity. So I would just tell people to take themselves seriously, contemplate what it means to be the medicine. We put so much time on becoming the doctor and studying that we always think that one more seminar, one more technique, I got to learn this and I got to learn that and study with this teacher and what. And really, my experience is when a person wakes up and become intent to grow up, the system they've already learned will be a reasonably good vehicle for expressing transcendent values that bring a whole new depth. So I would tell people, do not settle for superficial medicine. Look for and contemplate deeply what it would take to become the medicine. And that means looking at the places in our lives that were most fundamentally out of integrity and taking time out of the picture to resolve those integrity issues, and learning what it takes to arrive at a point in our own development where we don't have any fundamental glaring contradictions in our lives is what's going to teach us how to do everything we need to know with our patients.
I love that.
We need to do it with ourselves.
And you have a training, is this a brand new training this year, later this year in 2024? You said you're going to be doing the Shadow Resolution course?
Yes, and that's going to be a course really geared toward the development of the practitioner.
And you have courses going on right now that people are already enrolled in?
Well, I have a 2-year course, but this is probably the last, 99% it's the last one I'm ever doing. This 2-year class is the 23rd time I've given it.
Wow.
So I've been teaching this class for 25 years. And, I'm 65 and I'm going to be teaching less. I'm giving a weekend this March on Spirit of the Herbal Formulas. Okay. Differentiating the herbs by the 5 elements and looking at the deep nature of individual herbs and the herbal formulas. So basically every spring and fall, I'll be giving a weekend. I'm planning a 1-month teaching tour of Australia, New Zealand, and Tasmania for February 2025. And
Okay.
yeah, I'd say if people want to really learn from me really in depth in the spirit of everything we've been talking about, the shadow work course that I'll be giving next fall will really illuminate the developmental aspects of Chinese medicine.
And they can sign up for that or get access to like that on your website, lonnyjarrett.com.
Yeah, all my stuff's at lonnyjarrett.com.
Lonny, I hope that we can continue this conversation in a second podcast.
Anytime, I'd always be
Oh my
happy to.
goodness. This, I want to keep going, although I have another appointment to go to. So
Okay.
I want to express my gratitude, my deep gratitude for this conversation. It has benefited me so much, and I'm so grateful you allowed me to record it to benefit others. In the description of this podcast interview, I'm going to have your website. This may be your last chance to interact with Lonny, so I would jump on it.
Well, hope not.
Yeah. Well, no, you said you're not going to be doing the 2-year intensive anymore.
No, but people can always send emails.
Right.
Or come to a weekend.
Right. Or the weekend. It sounds like you have a lot going on and we didn't have enough time to cover all of the events you have, but I want to make sure that even in this time, I know that people are going to leave with so much wisdom and some advice and ways of just living in life. I resonate with so much of what you say of just the love approach and developing ourselves and working on ourselves. And so there was so much in this. I want to say thank you again. I want to let people know that most likely there's going to be a second conversation to this. And until that time, go to lonnyjarrett.com, LonnyJarrett.com. Your 3 books are listed there. All of your events are listed there. And until we see you again, thank you so much, Lonny. I really appreciate today's conversation.
Thank you, East. I appreciate your generosity and your passion for this.
Thank you.
Thanks
Happy
very
New
much.
Year. Bye.